Hello and good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to Childcare Aware of Minnesota's November Tell Talk, supporting families experiencing homelessness and housing instability with Janelle Leppa, Family and Youth Programs Director at Simpson Housing Services. Tell Talks, or Topics for Early Learning Leaders, are monthly webinars for early childhood program leaders to facilitate solutions-focused discussions for your questions about the early childhood field in Minnesota. These one-hour webinars do not meet the standards for a formal professional development event, and participants will not receive a certificate of completion. Tell Talks are designed as a community building opportunity for leaders to engage and share ideas surrounding a specific content area. The Tell Talks team consists of Nikki Lepowski, Quality Improvement Coordinator, and myself, Christy Berg, Workforce Advising Coordinator. We work with Corey Woosley and Katie Hoffman at Childcare Aware to coordinate Tell Talks. Some of our previous topics have included the power of interactions, social distancing in early childhood, and supporting children in an era of racism and police brutality. On December 15th, Corey Woosley, Nikki Lepowski, and myself will lead the Tell Talk on celebrating program leaders and the challenges you've worked through this year. And we will be asking you to share your stories with us, so look for more information in the follow-up email. We have added all of the previous Tell Talk recordings to the career advancement page of our website. After today's presentation, you will receive an email from us with our PowerPoint slides, along with any resources shared. You'll be able to access the link to the career advancement page from this slide. Childcare Aware of Minnesota is a resource and referral network for early childhood education in the state. We assist families in finding a quality childcare program. We support the professional development of early childhood educators with professional development opportunities, eager to learn online training, grants, scholarships, parent aware, and trainer and relationship-based professional development support. We keep the community informed on the importance of quality childcare. Childcare Information Services is a department within CCA that specializes in statewide information sharing and assisting families looking for childcare. CCIS sends a welcome packet to new programs, and every 3 years they survey programs about their business policies and tuition rates. When CCIS receives calls from program leaders with general questions, they will route you to the appropriate person to contact. Childcare Aware partners with Center for Inclusive Childcare. CICC has a team of coaches across the state ready to support the changing needs of childcare providers. They offer both individual and small group coaching. In response to the pandemic, CICC has designed virtual coaching focused on supporting programs as they navigate through challenges currently impacting care. CICC is developing a system of response to providers seeking specific COVID support related to a case of exposure to COVID in their site. This will be offered in 2 levels depending on the needs of the childcare setting. To request support, programs should contact CICC. The Tell Talks team partners with several other organizations to offer coordinated resources surrounding early care and education needs. As always, participants of Tell Talks are able to utilize the chat and question functions in GoToWebinar throughout the presentation. Please feel free to share your questions and thoughts on today's topic. We will read these questions and comments aloud during the broadcast. And now we'll welcome our speaker today, Janelle Leppa, on the topic of supporting families experiencing homelessness and housing instability. We're glad you could be here with us today. And Janelle has asked that we share a video clip to start us off. Janelle, would you please introduce the clip?
Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you again, Nikki and Christy, for having me here today. Childcare is so fundamental for our families who've experienced homelessness, and so I really appreciate being here. Before I get started in my presentation, if we could just take a few minutes and watch this clip of parents and children who have experienced homelessness speak about homelessness.
What is the hardest thing about not having your own house? You know, when we did live in a shelter?
Everything.
What's everything?
Everything up in the shelter. I'm saying everything.
The hardest thing about not having our own home is like how I dream to be successful and accomplish things.
Do kids at school know you are in a shelter?
No.
No.
And they always ask me, and I always say no.
They ask you if you're in the shelter?
Yeah. But one day, a little boy, he lived in a shelter, and he was in kindergarten, and everyone and the whole class made fun of him. And I don't like people making fun of me.
How did it make you guys feel when I told you that we might not know where we're going to live?
Scared?
Yeah. What were you scared of?
Rain? Because rain can be cold. And snow.
You know how it made me feel? I was scared. But what I was scared of is not being able to keep you guys safe.
It makes it harder to do homework in the shelter. You don't usually, you can like hear noise, like the bathroom and the kitchen, so it doesn't really get quiet.
Were you scared when you lived in a shelter?
Yeah, I felt really uncomfortable.
What's the best part of having a home?
You have your own space. Like, you can just run around in a room and say, "Home, I'm in here. So I love you." And we don't have to have what is it called? Curfew at 10.
What does having a home mean to you?
Having a home means to me is like I'm having a good day.
What would your dream bedroom look like?
Mini refrigerator, upstairs, big bed. No,
Upstairs in your bedroom?
exactly.
What would your dream bedroom look like?
Mini refrigerator, a king bed.
You're a little bit small for a king bed.
No, I'm not.
Why do you think every kid deserves a home?
I just want everybody to have their own life and be rich. The kids should grow up and graduate and stuff and have their own home. I just want everybody to pray that we'll have our own house. And I wish we had 4 big bedrooms so then me and my brother won't have to share because he snores a lot. I can
Okay, thank you for playing that video. And now I am going to begin to share the slideshow for today. Okay, so again, my name is Janelle Leppa, and I work at Simpson Housing Services. I have worked with families who have experienced homelessness at Simpson for just short of 20 years. And as I mentioned, at the very beginning, you know, there are many, many goals that families who experience housing instability are really working towards. And childcare is such an important foundation of making so many of those things possible. The stability and the routine, and a really safe and supportive place for parents to know kids are, so then they can go out and try to increase income with employment, or have an opportunity to look for housing or get needed supports. So I am really thrilled to be here today, having this opportunity to share a little bit of information that we have learned at Simpson, in hopes that it'll be helpful for all of you. Homelessness and housing instability can have devastating effects on children and families. One of the most pressing needs for parents experiencing homelessness and housing instability, as I've mentioned, is that high quality early learning and child care support for their children. Early childhood professionals are in a position to support families experiencing homelessness, and those experiencing housing stabilities as parents work to move towards a more stable life. So today we will, hopefully have some discussion around the topic today is really going to be focused on understanding the trauma of homelessness and housing instability, and how early childhood professionals can support families experiencing homelessness. As we go through, please feel free to add into the chat any questions or comments, and Christy will try to interject if I'm not seeing them, so they can be incorporated into the presentation. The first thing I guess I'd ask you all to do is, if you can use the chat box and share, what is the first thing you think of when you hear the word homelessness? So go ahead and, enter any comments in there. And I'll just kind of continue on, but feel free to read the chat as things might come up. Being homeless.
Janelle, there was some
go
responses.
ahead.
I don't know if you want me to read them or not. This is Nikki.
Oh, sure. Yeah, please go ahead.
So we have instability, needing resources, sad and scary, stressful.
Yes. Yep. And all of those things are so accurate. Being homeless is a traumatic experience that affects, both the child and the parent. It's not just the fact the child doesn't have what we might consider, a stable home. It's a lot of the barriers that go with that and the consequences around it too. As we saw, some of the kids speaking in this video and their parents, there's a heavy cost to not having housing stability and to being poor in your life. So, oh goodness, here we go. Okay, so there are multiple definitions of homelessness, and you know, and they're all kind of slightly different. The McKinney-Vento Act is one that really refers to children and youth who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So this definition includes children living in emergency shelters, motels, hotels, temporary or transitional housing, trailer parks, cars, general parks, public spaces, or abandoned buildings. And those sharing houses, so people who are doubled up, but maybe they can't live there indefinitely. Maybe it's a situation of, it's a lease violation, or the person doesn't have enough space who's taking them in, but will let them stay just for a temporary portion of time. And we know that the reason that they include that, due to housing loss, economic hardship, or similar reasons. The state of Minnesota defines homelessness as any individual, unaccompanied youth, or family that is without a permanent place to live that is fit for human habitation. Um, and so, so those are just kind of some basic definitions. And then homelessness in Minnesota, there is some statistics here from a study that the Wilder Foundation did in October of 2018. They do this survey, this is a statewide survey, every 3 years through face-to-face interviews with those experiencing homelessness. And it is this is all completed as kind of like a 1-day kind of day and time. So on that night, researchers found that 10,233 people experiencing homelessness were currently experiencing homelessness in Minnesota, and 3,265 were children in their were children living with their parents while homeless. 32% of those experiencing homelessness of that total number were the age 17 or younger. So so that is just kind of a sad reality. At Simpson Housing Services, at any given time, we serve over 300 families and over 600 children who are experiencing homelessness. We do not have a shelter, so we work with families to leave shelter and to get into housing in the community. Sometimes that's site-based, sometimes it's scattered site. There's a variety of different models we use, from very short term, around like 9 months of service, to some of our families who have experienced longer term homelessness, which is either a full year of homelessness or 3 different episodes or 4 different episodes in the prior 3 years. And so those families who've experienced long-term homelessness or have might be paired with disabilities are the families that that might go into one of our longer-term, non-time limited programs. So as we can see, from this stamp in October 25th of 2018, there were 3,265 children who were without kind of their own stable home, with markers like their pillow and their bed and blanket, their bathroom, their kitchen table, even a chair or a couch to sit on. The work we do at Simpson is to try to make it possible for the children I mentioned to have that solid place to call home. But as the old saying goes, it really does take a village. And as early childhood professionals, you are a really critical part of that village. Rather than take this time to talk about how families get to be homeless or why they are in the situation they are, let's talk about how you can be part of that village that helps lift them out of their situation. So I already touched on it a couple times, but I don't know if I can emphasize it enough. Childcare is so important for the stability of the family, and the stability that really enables families to find jobs and keep jobs. So now we'll go a little bit into more ways to support families. So I think increasing, doing something like this and really increasing your understanding of what families are experiencing when they lose housing, and also, what kind of supports help help move a family out of that. in terms of let me see here. I don't want to get, I think I got a little bit ahead of myself, so I apologize for that. So pregnant women experiencing homelessness are less likely to receive adequate prenatal care, and their children are at increased risk for low birth weight, which can harm cognition, physical, and social emotional development. As early childhood um, if people who have early childhood expertise, I know kind of the comprehensive ways that we really want to support um, the pregnancy for parents, and including great nutrition and access to health care, but also keeping stress in check is so important for that developing baby. And when parents are experiencing homelessness, stress levels are really high. For children who are homeless under the age of 5, more than 75% have been identified to have at least one major delay. Most commonly, this takes place with speech. And, one of the things when I really dug into this study that I found is that it's not just children who are currently experiencing a loss of housing. It is even if a child has, experienced homelessness one time, it makes them at higher risk of these developmental delays. From my work with families, I really believe that this is largely due to the stress and the focus, the need for the focus to be on those like really urging, pressing basic needs, which take away time for that kind of bonding that happens through play, and um, that ability for children to really thrive because both their parents and them have that space, the mental space, the physical space for relaxation. One story that really comes to mind for me is a mom who, later realized that her child was having some gross motor skills delays. And as she explored this with her doctor and early childhood professionals, she really made the link back to that period of infancy or even toddlerhood where they were staying in shelter. And because the shelter environment was so, um, there were so many people and so many people coming and going in the common spaces, that she almost always had her little child buckled in to the stroller, because this felt safer for the child to not get stepped on, to not get the germs of many feet coming and going, and just not having that space um, available to do all the exploring and pieces that we know contribute. So that is one way. I think the common delay in speech might have something to do with parents um, having less capacity in their day for just like singing the songs and reading the stories and talking, because so much of their energy is focused on survival. And then finally, children who are homeless or living in poverty are more likely than their peers to have developmental delays, as we talked about, learning disabilities, reduced academic achievement, chronic disease, and behavioral health concerns. Infants and toddlers are probably the most vulnerable to health risks and serious consequences. So, really, I think this, goes back to why that early childhood center is so important. it's a safe place for exploring and playing and relaxing and singing and all of the things with a really steady routine. One of the things that can be really disrupted during a time of enormous housing instability or homelessness is routine. Um, and so that is one of the ways that we at Simpson get really, really excited when high quality early childhood is secured. We know it'll give the parent some peace of mind, and we know that it will offer the child some opportunities to have a greater sense of normalcy in their life. Um, so homelessness, we very much consider it as a trauma itself. Um, one thing that I think back to is a time when one of my daughters was one was a toddler and one was in preschool, and we made a very happy switch to converting um, a bedroom into a play space and kind of moving a bedroom to another area of the house. And it really struck me how this very subtle change, kind of an exciting change for us, had kind of um, a stressful impact on my daughter at that time. And I thought, and she, obviously easily recovered and moved on, but it gave me a tiny, tiny personal glimpse into the stress of a family, of having a much, much more, more significant abrupt change, and not a change by choice. And that really, that the thinking of, gosh, what would happen if I had to pack up and put away all the toys because I didn't have a place to store them? Maybe we lost them entirely. If we went to a place that had been pretty quiet and reserved just for our family, to a place where there were dozens of other families living nearby, all with heightened stress. Um, and so we are not at all surprised when we see a high volume of families who've experienced homelessness, who are kind of experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, using substances at a higher rate than the national average. Um, and then the reality with housing in our country is that our systematic racism has very much led to the disproportionate numbers of families who identify as Black and Brown who experience homelessness. I'm going to go to the next slide. I could pause here in case there are, and just to kind of check in if there is any questions in the chat that I'm not seeing.
Thanks, Janelle. Yeah, there isn't anything right now. This is Nikki, but again, anyone who's on the webinar, feel free to type in any questions or comments you have. Janelle also just wanted to mention, you definitely don't have to, but if you wanted to turn on your webcam, you're able to do that too. And then again, for any of the participants, we'll follow up with resources and the slides after today's webinar, but feel free to enter questions, comments, things you have. Janelle's a great resource to have live right now.
Okay, well, how about I'll turn on my webcam when we've gone through the PowerPoint, and if there are more questions or discussions at that time, that we can do that. Okay, so this slide really focuses on ways that you all can support families in childcare settings who find themselves experiencing homelessness and housing stability. As much as possible, we'd encourage you to fight against stereotypes, really refrain from judgment. Society has already been so hard on the families that we work with, often using labels such as, not very smart, lazy, uncaring, judging people as poor parents when in fact, these parents are going through, in many cases, just heroic efforts to support their children through really challenging times. So seeing the families through a strength-based lens, um, really seeing their strength, their resiliency, the survivors that they, seeing them for the survivors that they are, and that they want this, they want amazing things for their children. They, that you share that goal of their children, growing into really happy and healthy people in later adults. When we see them through this lens, we don't assume and treat them like any other family. Even knowing the trauma and challenges that they're facing, um, we know that there's no need to be condescending. We don't need to take a savior attitude with them. They really deserve our respect, the same kind of respect that we would extend to any other family. Um, it is important to keep in mind that there might not be money for field trips, and kind of understanding how childcare systems work. Sometimes our families may not be as comfortable navigating this system, or kind of, participating in activities that other families, know well. So sometimes having um, just a patience and understanding, sometimes realizing that parents may have unrealistic expectations for staff, and um, through conversation and through relationship building, we can definitely build strong partnerships. We definitely recommend, you know, even though it's kind of more challenging, finding space and time to speak with families privately if there are any issues or concerns. Um, and then, offering resources in as dignified manner as possible. If there is opportunity for maybe sharing food resources or a clothing giveaway, really giving some thought to, if you were experiencing this, how could you make how would you feel in receiving that service? Like, would it be better if there was a little more privacy for taking donations, and bags handy and available if there are food or clothing items that are kind of up for grabs. And we definitely want to focus on empowering parents. um, you know, we always find our parents get so excited to talk about their child's learning and their future. Parents love talking about brain development and hearing about their child's successes. So, making sure that we're never making assumptions that, they don't really care, or, because they're not as openly expressive as other parents, that they wouldn't appreciate being sought out, and have the strengths in their child really be recognized. Um, And then, and I know that all of you who have centers and high quality places are really focused on creating that inviting, welcoming learning culture for all, and that benefits all children, and is certainly not lost on families who've experienced trauma and homelessness. Consider what extra attention and understanding that children who are experiencing homeless and housing instability might need. Just having, this work does require a little bit of extra patience. It's sometimes extra opportunity. And, both the parents and the children may experiencing trauma. And one things that we know about trauma is it can make people a little bit more heightened and a little bit more sensitive in their responses to things. Those of us, in times of very, very high stress, find that our tempers can be shorter. We may be quicker to find fault or judgment, or even what seems like lashing out. And so that patience and that patience and kind of listening, that being willing to take that extra time to hear the stressors and to say, I see you, you're valued here. We're so glad, that you have decided to share your child with us for this time. So as much as we can make that a very inclusive, your center a very inclusive place, um, and definitely keep in mind that their home life may be disorganized and unpredictable due to moving around, being in shelter, changing schools, lacking familiarity with surroundings in maybe in new environments, um, conditions that require constant sharing and are possibly overcrowded. So if the family is concerned about not having money for food or rent or a doctor's visits, that creates a pervasive sense of anxiety and unpredictability. The longer the child is in this environment, the worse the vicious cycle of school becomes. And eventually kids will say, there's something wrong with me. I'm stupid. So which really increases the importance of us, being very affirming and offering additional opportunities to practice and support new skills. So, so children who experience homelessness and housing instability have significantly higher rates of emotional, behavioral, and immediate and long-term health problems. They often struggle with self-esteem. Um, and so, and unfortunately, violence impacts these children who've already experiencing these, the layers of poverty and homelessness at higher rates as well. So you can really make a difference in what they learn and how they develop. With the help of positive, nurturing, early learning environments, they very well could get on the same playing field as other children. One of the things that has been an absolute joy in doing this work has been seeing how resilient children are. Because they're behind at 2 does not mean that they will be behind at 3, especially if they have the right interventions and we close what we call that opportunity gap. Which child care centers are so well positioned to support. I know we talked about this before, but that learning through play and safe environments is just like the bedrock of stability for our children and for their growth. And it's the expertise of all of you who are in early childhood learning. And so the pairing of these things is so important. In your learning centers, children learn to trust others, to regulate their emotions, to interact with the world. They can develop a sense of the world as safe and come to understand their own value as individuals. Children depend heavily on adults to help them experience, regulate, and express emotions. So keep in mind, young children's emotional health is interconnected to emotional and social characteristics of their environment, their family, their home, their school. Other things to keep in mind is that some children only know how to communicate their feelings through physical means, such as hitting, kicking, throwing objects, and spitting sometimes. children make their needs known through their behaviors, and it is our challenge and our task to understand and respond to those needs, even when they are pushing us away. Often, the pushing away can mean, I need you right now, and I don't know how to tell you. I don't have, the words to share this with you. I love that saying, and I certainly don't know off the top of my head who came up with it, but kind of looking at the underlying need of the behavior, and that saying of like, instead of asking, why did you do that? Kind of really looking at, what do you need? What is the need underlying this behavior? Um, and then, I think for all of us is understanding that, children, same as adults, are triggered by their trauma. Sometimes they hide under tables, in cubbies, or in any spaces that they can hide. Other children will run when they're triggered. They run around the room, down the hall, around the gym. Still others seek extra reassurance through physical connection, like cuddling, um, or rocking, or music. And so, as much as we can, kind of being willing to slow down and really think about, what does that behavior mean? What might that child need? So another aspect of this that we should talk about is that, as you can see in the video, homeless children can be hard to identify. And often the stigma behind being homelessness will make both children and their caregivers unlikely or less likely to say, hey, we're experiencing homelessness now, or we really don't have a steady place, we're moving from place to place. And so sometimes we don't need to necessarily know all the we don't need to know all the depths of their experience, but if we see these behaviors, we can wonder that there's a possibility that there is some instability going on, and it can serve as a reminder for us to try to kind of bump up our patience a little bit. So another one of the consequences of homelessness is I think that feeling of like, that shame, or like, I need to hide. I don't want to be as revealing about what's going on, such as, if violence, domestic violence or other things are kind of playing into either their cause of their homelessness, or it's kind of a result of their homelessness. They're staying in situations where, it certainly wouldn't be their first, second, or third choice. Also, keeping in mind that our children are exposed and can come to see violence as natural and as a natural way to respond to people and interact with them. And so kind of that redirection, staying patient, but, clearly having clear expectations of a space. But again, like, more patience. It's like the layered effect of being, experiencing trauma and violence and homelessness and whatever else may, often is kind of leading up to misbehaviors. It it really speaks to like the need to not turn our backs on children, and as much as we can explore solutions that don't mean turning them away from early childhood centers that may be so needed. Children surrounded by violence in their homes and communities learn from an early age that they cannot trust, that the world isn't safe, and that they are powerless to change their circumstances. The relationships that they build at your center, the relationships their parents build with center staff, can be a new opportunity. It can be the beginning of learning trust and learning what relationships can and should look like in terms of safety and respect. It is possible for both children and parents, or a possibility for both children and parents, possibilities, I should say, for both children and parents can be compromised by homelessness and housing instability. It really, truly does take a village, and early learning environments are a crucial part of that village. Okay, so I am gonna figure out how to stop sharing my slide screen, I think, and I'm gonna turn on my camera. Let's see, okay, I think the camera's turning on. Oh goodness. Is there any other, I don't know if this is even the proper setting, and now I just see like a really huge me on the screen, but if there are any questions, comments, I know it's hard to share, stories through the chat, but definitely am interested to hear or respond as you have.
Thanks, Janelle, for sharing that information. There's a couple comments that I think would be helpful and maybe, would elaborate on, or if anyone has anything that they want to add, feel free just to use your raising your hand on the GoToWebinar dashboard. And since we have a smaller group, we can just go ahead and take you off mute. Or if you feel more comfortable, of course, you could type it in the questions box too. So again, thanks, Janelle, for all this content. There were a couple points that Teresa and Carrie made, and just re-emphasizing the importance of recognizing strengths and sharing successes, even if the family or the children are not as openly expressive, and asking how you would feel receiving services in the way they're being offered. So that's a great point that Teresa made. And then to Carrie's point, she mentioned this, that, she's unaware at this time that any of their families are experiencing homelessness, but wanted to make sure that, there's some awareness of families that have experienced economic impacts of COVID, and how that might be translating to behaviors, and differing behaviors in children. So all really great points. And if you have anything to add, feel free.
Yeah, it's such a good point to bring up COVID and the additional stressors for staff working in centers and for parents and children. And yeah, we've definitely been hearing about reduced incomes that families, or stress of how bills will be paid in the future, or what is going to happen to jobs. So it's a reminder for me to, be extra grateful to all of you doing this very, very important work during, this global pandemic.
Janelle, I had a question for you as we were talking about this topic and some of the things that you brought up in the last, few minutes. If, a program is looking, or a leader in their program is looking for additional resources on how to support families, what would you suggest? You suggest they reach out to a specific local agency? Would you, say something about maybe reaching out to Simpson? Or what would, if an early childhood program leader had additional questions or looking for resources after today's webinar, what would you suggest?
Sure. Yes. So, certainly you are welcome to contact me with like broader questions. most counties, and Hennepin County, where I'm located, is definitely one of those, have their own intake system for kind of triaging families who are experiencing housing instability. So in Hennepin County, there is a coordinated entry access point, and I will send out kind of the link for that, but really kind of, Hennepin County, by Googling Hennepin County coordinated entry system will bring you to Hennepin County's website where there's kind of basic information of how does the family access shelter, um, and so forth, along with other resources. There are just a couple of ways, really the only way I can think of in Hennepin County where a family would access shelter outside of coordinated entry would be to, I think Mary's Place is a shelter that doesn't participate in the coordinated entry process. And so there, she kind of has her own intake. But for the most part, counties are trying to make their like an entry point so it's not as like overwhelming to like, do I have to call 50 different places and who has an opening? So Simpson, for example, we only are able to take referrals through the coordinated entry system, and that is the case for most providers. That's a great question.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that information. I saw a couple hands raised, but I see them, they might have gone down. So I won't call it anybody. Oh, great, Sarah. I see that you raised your hand. If you're okay, I'm going to go ahead and take you off mute and feel free to ask your question or your comment. Oh, Sarah, you're unmuted on my end, but I think you're muted on your side still. If that's not working for you, feel free just to go ahead and type in the question or the chat box too. I think we'll go ahead and allow a little bit more time for resources or questions to Janelle, and then make sure that we follow up with whatever we need for you, as well as the recording. Let's see. I don't see anything else in the chat right now, so.
Okay. Great. Well, you have my contact information, and I can email you this PowerPoint, and then I guess you're welcome to pass on if someone does have a follow-up question they'd like to ask. They certainly could reach out to me.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Janelle, so much. Christy, I don't know if you have any final comments before we close it out for today's Tell Talk webinar.
No, just one more thank you for being here, Janelle. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. I just am a huge fan of Child Care Aware. So thank you all for your work.
And for those of you on the call, again, we can't reiterate enough, thank you for the work that you're doing every single day, whether you're support staff or program leader. It is very much needed, and can't say enough how thankful I am for you to be in our community and our state. So great, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.